All right, welcome back to the Event Modeling and Event Sourcing podcast with your hosts, Martin and Adam.
Hello.
Martin, good to see you again. It's been a while since
Yes,
we recorded.
same. Yes, was very looking forward to this episode,
Yeah,
as
so we
always.
had, yeah, of course. So we had a quick catch up before recording, as always, and really happy to hear that things are moving forward with a lot of clients and people calling you back for engagements and all that. And I think Jake is also now finally started as well. So
Yeah,
the community is thriving, lots of activity around event modeling and event sourcing, which is always good to see. Yeah, a lot of different tools being created out there. I had a stream, live stream with On Auto. So shout out to Sam and that project. Really good to see the interest and the amount of tooling being built for what we're
yeah,
all about. So it really helps us. The more people know about it, the more people make tools for this, the better off everyone is. So I'm really happy. How about you?
and interest is growing everywhere. So I see it really every day. Every day I get more requests, more people asking questions. So it really comes from everywhere, which is really amazing. I love to see that.
I think a lot of it is your book being out there. I think that's a
Yeah,
big component. It's quite popular. People do pass that around quite a bit. So
I think we have
again, all that effort was worth something, Martin.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are closing in on 1,700 books
Oh
sold,
wow,
which is really amazing. Never expected that number.
yeah. I stand by my prediction. I think by the end of the year we're going to be well past 4,000. I have no problem seeing this. I think we're getting to the point where we've stopped. I mean, if you've really watched, we've stopped promoting the book at all. I mean, I haven't really. I still say it like in like this or something like that, but I haven't made a post about the book in like a couple of months, and it's still selling.
Yeah,
It's
I,
I think it's the point where people are now referring the book. It's really out of our hands. It's really standing on its own merit. So someone buys the book and they like it, they're recommending it to another team, someone else in the industry, and so we're seeing organic growth. It's no longer just the inner circle talking about event modeling and event sourcing, promoting it. It's really the general public out there
yeah,
understanding what this book is and discovering this by themselves, which is really exciting.
yeah, yeah. I'm really looking forward. I'm about to launch this online course for the book, and
Oh,
there's also
right.
a lot.
Yes.
There's also a lot of interest. So we're really trying to put out a lot of resources
Yeah.
that just help.
I think that pairing of the book plus the course that goes with it is going to be really good, and then plus with the specific workshops, that interactivity,
Yeah,
and then of course the private workshops that each of us does. Like we have our own with our clients and etc. And Jake's going to have his own. That's also another good thing. So I think we talked about it last time. There's a really good range of places where someone can get started. They can start by
yeah,
reading the article, watching some things, listening to this podcast, experimenting a little bit on their own. But as their interest grows, they have another place to go. They can take a workshop, a paid workshop. They can take the course along with the book. They can,
yeah,
involve their company or their own project with us. You, me, Jake, Chris, all these people that have event sourcing companies along with event modeling. So as more and more companies grow their businesses, all of these things like courses and workshops will just continue to grow. So this is
yeah. I
really
think that
exciting times. Yeah.
there's kind of this clear roadmap where you can start and you can just decide on yourself how far do you want to go, which is really, I think this is really neat and this really helps. Just by starting and reading the book is a good starting point, and then you can just decide on yourself
Yeah.
how to move on, which is really, I think it's the right way to do it.
Yeah. And I think the book is really important because yes, you can Google a lot of articles, but because the concept of event sourcing, less so event modeling as it is more recent, but there's a lot of outdated information. I'm not that happy with the fact that the earliest publications on event sourcing are the ones that are the most popular.
Yeah,
Simply because of who it was that said it. It was Martin Fowler, and it was said a long time. So there's a lot of SEO that went out to popularize that article, which means that anyone that's looking for information about this is really stuck in starting from the initial kind of concepts and ideas about how to approach this. And I think that that's a problem with people needing to then go repeat the mistakes because they're starting from that
Yeah.
old spot. So the book is really an amazing thing that happened because it puts a line in the sand that, at this point in time, it's 2024, 2025. This is the way that's the most up to date of working with event modeling and event sourcing. So I think that's really important, and the fact that it took off in sales as it did initially says a lot. And I'm hoping that we continue to see people start from what we know about event sourcing and event modeling, in 2024 and 2025,
Yeah.
rather than going back to 2010 and 2005 and all these old articles that they're still good. I mean, at least they introduced this, but there's so many devil in the details when you're actually doing this at scale for many projects. And of course, at Adaptec, we've only done this way for the last 10 years. September will be our 10-year anniversary
Oh,
this
really?
year.
Amazing.
Yeah,
That's
that'll
amazing.
be the. I can't believe it how time flies.
Yeah.
But it's a decade of only doing event sourcing, and so
Impressive.
when I say that this doesn't work or I prefer this way, it's based on a lot of feedback from how our contracts went, how the projects went,
Yeah.
and some real eye opening things from that 10-year journey. So, and of course, you yourself have switched that way. Jake has switched 100% to this way. Chris Condren has always worked this way. He's now doing more of this consulting on his own, but he also has decade plus experience. Like personally, me and Chris have probably 15 years because we didn't incorporate right away. I
Yeah.
incorporated once I was maybe 7 years into event sourcing only. So I personally know that I wouldn't want to do anything other than event sourcing, but then I needed to prove it to myself that, I need a whole team. I want this to actually scale. So can I run a whole company doing things only this way? And the answer is yes. And even more so because those people that came, they also see they came to work with us. They also see that they don't want to work any other way.
Yeah.
So we've pretty much had no turnover whatsoever. The initial people that worked with me are still here. No one has any plans on going anywhere. So that says a lot because over
It
the
does.
last 2 decades, turnover is a big problem in IT, and we saw none of that arise for us. And simply by having a good approach, a fair approach, removing bias, and all of these things that we discuss on this podcast really makes people want to stay. So anyway, it's kind of fun to talk about all these things as I approach the 10-year anniversary of the company. It's still hard to believe, but
Yeah.
uh,
I don't think there are many companies around who can say we did only event sourcing for a decade. This is
no.
really, really impressive.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I wanted. There's a lot of people there that'll say, oh, no, we can do event sourcing, but that's
Yeah.
not their specialty. And I think we touched on it on the last episode is that you want experts, and experts show you how good they are by what their dedication level is to something. So if you're saying, well, we did a few projects on event sourcing, that is a different level of expert than we've only been doing event sourcing. We've only been helping, event sourcing projects that maybe ran into trouble and we had to come in and rescue them. And a lot of times people don't realize that it's event sourcing plus event modeling. A lot of what we do really depends on event modeling to the point that in order to enable an event sourcing project, event modeling is a requirement for us. Like we cannot really start without having an event model. There's very few times that we've done anything, maybe just infrastructure work for event sourcing. But if there's features that are going to be shipped to users, I want that diagram behind me filled out
Yeah.
so we know
Absolutely.
who's working on what.
To
And
be honest,
that's
I wouldn't dare to start an event sourcing project without event modeling. So I wouldn't
yeah.
do it. So it makes total sense.
Yeah, well, that's it's a good side topic that we have. So we have a few topics this week. Let's do some announcements. So we have we're pushing back the workshop to March 27th. That's going to be the introductory workshop, and if you're already well versed or at least know a bit about event sourcing and event modeling, and you want to take the advanced one, that's going to be April 3rd. And that one for the advanced topics, we're going to limit the amount of people that can go. But that doesn't mean that it's we don't want to have this scarcity thing. This is not a sales tactic. If it fills out, there'll be another one a week later. So if you missed out on April 3rd and it fills out, then we'll have an April 10th, and we'll do the same thing. We'll start to fill that up, and hopefully by keeping it down to a low number of people, like 10, we'll be able to give you a lot more attention for all the nitty gritty details. We can jump into some implementation specific questions that have more to do with your own problems internally. So I think it's a great idea, right, Martin, to have a smaller
Absolutely,
group.
absolutely. I would really join. If I were not me, I would join. Definitely. I
So
mean,
it's, I mean,
the last workshop we had was kind of the advanced version already, although it was scheduled as the basic workshop, and the discussions we had in this workshop were really amazing. Still,
yeah,
I still remember these discussions; they were just amazing.
yeah, it's we also learn from this, right? So there's things that I forget that something was important. I'm like, oh yeah, this person's struggling with this. We should probably bring this up. So even though I might know a concept, I really don't talk about it anymore because maybe we've eliminated it for ourselves, like in the way we work. But then that those questions from participants really say, okay, right, yeah, the regular people that are just starting on this, they may have these things they run into. So let's go back and do that. So
Yeah,
this feedback loop with the community through these workshops, because they start to really dig into the problems that people are having in their organizations, it gets to realistic scenarios and all that, because we can make all sorts of fun projects that are hello world equivalents for event sourcing, but the real learning happens when you're applying this together with experts,
absolutely.
on what you have. So that's a real good start to really feel that experience of working with experts and have your issues resolved in the advanced version. So again, that's March 27th for the beginner intro type of work. We can send entire teams. There's really not going to be much. I mean, unless it gets ridiculous, we're probably going to, have as many people as want to join that workshop. But if we're going to get over 50 or something, we're going to probably add a second date pretty
Yeah,
quick.
that would not be a problem. But I think so, I'm really looking forward to both of these workshops. So the beginner workshop will kind of be a guided introduction with exercises, and I think the advanced workshop will really be diving into some real world problems,
Mhm.
which will both be very very interesting. So I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to both of them.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I get, I try to get workshops going as often as time will allow me. And every time I don't have a workshop for a couple of months or whatever, I feel this emptiness in my heart
Yeah,
that I'm not connecting with those that really want to connect with us and do this. So it'll be really good. So I'm looking forward to that. I fixed some DNS things and all that, and all sorts of stuff on my website, which is part of the reason that we've been delaying things. But now I think we're all clear to go. So that's it for the announcements, really, for now. Book is selling well. Continue to please keep recommending it if you like it, and we'll just have a better place for everyone to work in. So, okay, let's start with some of the topics from the community that we've come across. So, um, the first one, we're kind of
question.
digging in deeper to something we
Yeah,
touched on before, which is the expert help. But after talking about that, flipping it back to, well, what are we helping with? What are the knowledge gaps in event sourcing that tend to derail efforts to move to event sourcing, right? Um, so we had a quick chat before about this. So in terms of what people might, what people might think is good enough to start for a team to do event sourcing, how do the knowledge gaps hurt that team? What do you think?
the Yeah, I think so. Most teams I start with, they do not even have knowledge gaps. They have no prior experience with event sourcing. So most teams do not have any experience, and many of them try to jump into the cold water and simply try to start doing event sourcing. Reading a few articles doesn't sound that complicated. Should be fine. Watching a few videos, and then just go. But
Yeah.
I think that is most of the time doomed to fail because these nuances you need to get right, at least in a real world project, it's just too hard to get right without any experience,
Yeah.
right?
I think the knowledge gaps are different for different people. So, while one person might understand that events must be really small and just the core information, the minimum information you need to change the state of the system. Okay, they got that part, but they might miss or not be good at the part of where you want to make a whole bunch of these these green boxes behind me,
Yeah,
read models, right? They're still, maybe for them, they're still stuck in really letting go of dry. Don't repeat yourself from solid, or not solid, but the better practices or whatever. I hate mentioning solid because now it's a sludge of concepts to me, strewn together
yeah,
for reasons. But now, someone like that, they're good at one thing because that's what they clung on to, when they were learning event sourcing. And another person on the same team might have the inverse. They might be, quite good at making green boxes all the time, but their missing information is that they may make events that are too big. They're using events
yeah,
to store redundant information, and so they're destroying the benefit of the events being a source of truth. So when people look at the schema of the events, when information's in there, they start to get confused. Like, okay, this also has the same field with the same property. Why is this here again? It might be okay for some things where an event is really a snapshot. I'm saving the record to be this. It's fine in some cases, but most of the time, events are really a very reduced version of what's changed. And if you lose that, then you lose kind of like, which event am I going to depend on if I'm repeating an information in another. It might not be as clear as to which one came first, which one has the repeated information. So you have to be careful about that. So I'm just giving an example of where knowledge gaps on the team that doesn't have expert help, how that might have a problem. You might say that, well, these people can then be complementary. They can work together and they can help each other. Truth of the matter is that they probably don't have time, and maybe they're pairing with other people. So they're actually in different pairs and they don't know that they have this complementary skill. So even at that point, they don't have someone that's experienced to basically notice this and say, look, Joe, you should talk to so and so. They understand that, but inversely, you have something to tell them because I can see that. So that's where you kind of want the guidance for these things. It's not that these concepts, like you said, these concepts are not hard. What's hard is that people uh, don't understand how much of the old things they have to let go. So it's
yeah,
not the concept that's hard. It's letting go of what was their safety net for so many years. And you needed a lot of safety nets for the single model, spinning the plates, the deck of the house of cards you build based on one model where, there's so many side effects. You change something in your system and you cause these whack-a-mole bugs that come up. So people are very, holding on tight to these things that really saved them much more misery in the old way of working. And they don't know that they can let go of these things because those are not concerns in an event sourcing project. So, these knowledge gaps are kind of an interesting way of looking at it, where someone might be holding on to dry, and someone else might be holding on to something else entirely. Um, maybe they're influenced by PubSub. Publish everything all the time so that everyone can subscribe. Well, in event sourcing, that's kind of bad because if you're doing that, your events become littered with extraneous information, and you don't know really what your source of truth is. Any thoughts about this type of gap analysis?
I think the big problem with these gaps is it's really hard to overcome them because you can read about event design, you can read about how to do it right, but I think you need to do it a few times, really hands on, to really understand what does it actually mean. By just reading it and never applying it, you will never overcome these knowledge
Yeah,
gaps. So you
I
need to
think there's
apply it.
also there's
Applying
also
it, uh,
sorry, go
just
ahead.
applying it without someone who has already done this in a few projects is just takes a lot of time and requires it will result in a lot of errors. You need to make a lot of errors to get it right in the end. So yeah, that's probably
Yeah. And I think it's also the fear of how dropping some of those things you've been holding on to, you are not sure if others on your team also have done this or they're also holding on to the same thing. So there, as you're learning a new way of working, whatever it is, you have a fear of affecting your team negatively as well. So if I'm
Yeah,
doing event sourcing, because I'm in a team, I have less courage to change things, because in the old way of doing things, if I was less careful, my impact was huge to the team. I could set them back. I could really put in a blocker. I do a refactoring that affects everyone else's work that they've done before. They're all going to be mad at me, right? We don't have this. We have the slice by the slice approach. So, and that again is again like something that you have to experience to gain that courage. You can read about, writing a unicycle all you want, but until you get on the unicycle and practice, it's not going to be good enough. And I think this fear of affecting other people on the team is kind of similar. You have to have gone through working this way with people a few times to get the confidence to say that, I'm quite happy to focus on my slice, and I'm fully confident that if I continue to do this, the event model will tell me how things work together, and that these
yeah,
contracts are good enough for others to do their work. I don't have to worry about what the next person to me is doing on their slice, the next pair of people pairing on something, or whatever it is, however you set up your organization. That's another, I think, where the knowledge gaps and the inexperience kind of fold into how people might have a tough time starting with event sourcing. Again, it's not event sourcing itself. It's just people are not working the way they used to. You
yeah.
can't get it for free. You can't stop working the old way that doesn't work well without dropping it. So
That's true.
the safety net is a tough one to crack. And I think when you have a mix of people, different people have different ways where how it manifests to the team. So, I think it's also why we continue to work with teams all the time. They come back to us because they might have new people, and they already know that their experienced teams have this under control, but they don't have the bandwidth to maybe pair with the new people on new teams, and so they'll call us back in to kind of do what we did with them for this
Yeah,
new team, and that really sets them up to not slow down progress on other projects, and they know that they have the same help they had before. They know what they're getting. They're going to get slices. It's all events. It's all event modeled. It's planned nicely, and it'll integrate properly. They have that confidence. So yeah, these knowledge gaps are much better served when you have someone that's experienced with it. And like you
especially
said
with the
earlier,
slice, especially with the slice-based approach. So,
yes,
in my opinion, it's not even event sourcing that is the problem, but the slice-based approach, thinking in slices and really experiencing it. Like, oh, if I build this slice and this thing stays stable, it won't change. Uh, you need to see this live to
yeah,
really understand it. You can read my book, you can take the course, it will not help. You need to do it, and then you will see it.
yeah. You need to get that confidence of seeing others work around
Yeah,
you, around this way of working. As you yourself are adopting this new way of working, you need to see that others around you experiencing the same thing. That this beautiful, while we're being entirely collaborative about the whole process, the autonomy you have for your own work, the peace of mind that what you do is not going to destroy someone else's progress is amazing. So this slice way of working is I can't think of a better way of doing things. So we also have some more topics that touch on this way of thinking and how it unlocks some of these ways we're thinking of complexity. So let's jump on to the second topic then. So, unless you have any more to add, Martin,
no,
what
I
else?
think I think
Anything?
we're good.
It's a
I
good
think
one.
we're
Okay,
yeah.
good to end on that note for this. Um, so the next one we have. So this keeps coming back because I think the industry, at least distributed systems, event-driven systems, have this saga pattern. It just rears its ugly head over and over again, and sometimes it's not talked about. I mean, people are generally getting help by reading about sagas, and they stopped using the word, but they're still talking about processors, and they're still talking about the algorithms within the processor, the decision trees within the processor, instead of looking at information flow. So I'm just gonna let's discuss this after I say what the situation is. So we have so we have this idea that someone has an idea of a traditional process. I have to start this thing and it'll get the price of a stock and then it'll do the next thing. How does one processor do this? Key is it's not one processor. And the reason that people think it's one processor is because of this idea that's been propagated with process managers, aka Sagas, in this distributed thing that a Saga is an entity. And I think it's it's lumping a lot of complexity into one thing, which is not
Yeah.
good. And so I think one of the best patterns to think about, talking about the Saga pattern, and actually I should say template to kind of unwind the Saga. So if you're doing event modeling and
Yeah,
there's
I
no
like.
Sagas in it, and you want to implement what you traditionally had as one giant process manager or Saga or something, think of every step that your processor or Saga has to do is just a column on a to-do list, right? And you have this table with these rows of different things getting finished bit by bit, one thing at a time. And if it's a stock purchase, you have to acquire a current price to even put in an order that makes sense. You might want to, query the order book itself to see what the bid and ask is and all that kind of stuff. That's like, well, that's your API call to get data so that you can do something. Well, that is a separate step. I think a lot of people lump this in as one
Yeah,
step,
exactly.
where like, well, I just have this procedure where at this point in the code, it makes this API call to get the price, then it continues. Bad way of thinking about it. It's about what is the state that you're going through. You have a state where it knows nothing. You only know what you want to do, right? That is the coordinator. That's the first step. That's a separate processor to coordinate. Now, the second step is to, okay, which things do I need to get prices for? Okay, these things. That's the second processor to do that. Now you can go back to the original processor once the prices were filled in to those columns. You can go and have that original processor now, call the APIs to put on the orders at the different exchanges at the prices based on the prices you just got from the previous processor. And that can include your SLA. I mean, that can include timestamps so that if that processor was late getting the results back, they're stale because they're more than 10 seconds old or whatever your SLA is. And then you have to maybe repeat it. Maybe that one column in that to-do list is, needs to retry, and it's number 2 on the retry, right? Or the first retry or
Yeah.
whatever. And so you have these business rules that are spread out to how you move through the process. It's no longer a procedure with some API call in the middle, going back and then doing the same thing. You literally want to decompose that procedural function into how can I have this integrity if I pull the plug along this, anywhere along my traditional logic line. If I pull the plug from the server and I plug it back in and it goes back online, how is this going to continue? So this mentality of just
Yeah.
having, one ledger with a whole bunch of, that's what we call them to-do lists, because it's really like, in order for me to fulfill this, I have to do a lookup, I have to do X, I have to do Y, I have to do Z, and then I can do what I was wanting to do originally. All of those can be translated into columns in one row for that entire process. That's all you need. A Saga is unnecessary complexity. You just have one row saying what you got, what you don't have. You have a coordinator. You have processors that basically are lock in step with each of those columns along the way. That is your Saga. There's no need to call it a Saga. There's no need to have an extra entity to deal with it. It's really just another green box that feeds one or more processors that do one thing and one thing only. So stop thinking of a process or function as being this complicated list of steps with this procedure. You split them up onto individual pieces, and it's kind of like the Unix philosophy: one tool that does a job well. You
Yeah.
have the coordinators say these are the steps that we want to coordinate going through. I have something that fetches the price. That's all it does, just fetches the price. Maybe you have one thing that fetches the price from the New York Stock Exchange. Then you have one from the Hang Seng, and you have one from the German Stock Exchange. They're built for those APIs. That's all they do. They don't need to have a big if statement for what they do for each one. You can, you can tend to them as you wish. And then not only that, but you have the results coordinated in a simple record. A simple row in a database table will do. And that's it. So I think that's what I wanted to say. What are your thoughts on this?
When you model this, so I think what we need here is really a few more examples which are a little bit more complex. You posted one this
Mm-hmm.
morning in Discord, and I think this will really help. So when you model something like this, would it be several processes connected to the same to-do list, or how would you model that?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, maybe what scares people from the simplicity of one step only in an event model is that they have to now make a whole bunch of green boxes for something that's a saga, and that's actually the
Yeah,
opposite. The saga is one green box with, where a row represents a whole bunch of things. So it's actually um, quite the opposite.
yeah,
But I think what people have a problem with is that they can attach multiple processors to that same to do list, because a lot of times there's this if I'm just automating one thing, then yes, the green box, the to do list, only is attached to one processor, does one thing.
yeah,
But really, um, even if you call it the same processor and it's doing different things, it's really separate processors, because coordinating whether I'm going to buy a stock or not is a different process than just fetching the data for the current price and maybe the order book status,
yeah,
right, and the records there. So I think when people want to think of sagas and more complex things that they're automating, is that they should say, do I have a place where a row in the table tells me where I'm at for any of these things that have to happen? That is the
yeah.
simplest way to start. And yes, you will get into more complex things where it's like way longer things, but then you can break them up into, sub sagas or sub, coordinations, or
Sub-sagas.
multiple to-do lists. Like, I
Yeah,
think once you get into, like, 10 columns in your to-do list of, 10 different things that have to get accomplished, or 9 or whatever, you might start to think that I kind of need another workflow to be cut off at some point. And it's very easy to glue those together, because you can say phase one ended successfully, phase two starts with whatever the projection is from that. So all of these things are just coordinating information moving through a system. There is no magic kind of one single pattern to do all this. It's really about coordinating what information do I need, when did it get into the system, can I make a decision based on that system now? If so, yes, then pass it on to the next set of steps outside of this one automation, this one long sort of workflow process. So I always call them workflow processes, and these to-do lists really kind of identify what that is. So yeah, we need more examples. I think the stock market is a good one, because that has a lot of like SLAs
yeah,
in there. You kind of have to understand when you got information in the system to understand how stale it is, because that stock market stuff is so time sensitive that it doesn't matter if you're doing sync, async, or if it's in process, like what the implementation is. You always have to say, how stale is this information, and that does not escape the any kind of implementation. There's no implementation that'll give you something that says that this is now. There's no now. Every time you're looking at information that's stale, it's just how stale are you willing to tolerate it to be. So I don't know what other topics. I mean, what other examples would be good? I think we have these other ones that we've used traditionally, like booking trips when you have a flight, a car rental, and whatever. I think that's another one. There's definitely, you can come up with thousands from
yeah.
from different things, but yeah, definitely we could work on some other ones. And that thing that I had on Discord, I just drew that in 5 minutes. It didn't take me long at all to show the concept. So once you understand it, these are not like magical formulas that are super hard to do. That it's about dropping the old way of thinking and just saying, what do I have in the system at this point in terms of information, and letting go of the implementation. Once you let go that this must be an API call in the middle of a long procedure that I'm writing, because that's the way I've done things before, and I use IOC containers and dependency injection to have a mock of the service, all that
Yeah.
garbage goes out the window. Just like, what information do I have in the system at any point in time? Can I go on to the next step with this information? That's it. The implementation may be whatever you want, but I'm always dividing it up to command handler after command handler. Processors that are feeding these previous states into potentially some of that information into the commands, and it's just the same patterns over and over again. So I think another, yeah,
I think it's really
we're
thinking
leading
about
on
it.
to another topic, so I'm going to stop.
Just, I think what is really helpful is just thinking about it as this, just as this one table where you maybe only have a status flag, and this status flag triggers one or more processors. So you have several processors basically working on this to-do list, depending on the state of the to-do list. That is something I think we haven't discussed this a lot, that this is
Yeah,
possible.
it could be a Boolean, as this is done or not for
For
the
example.
simplest case, but for the processor of purchasing the stock or kicking off a specific job that you get from somewhere else, you could have three states. So I have, okay,
Exactly.
price, so waiting for price. So the processor that fetches the price from the stock exchange comes back. Once it does that, it says waiting for execution, right? And then the other processor goes and calls to make the order, and then that same field gets changed to done as the last thing completes. And so now the original processor no longer picks up that job because it's finished. So yes, you can have Boolean, but when you have these things starting to add more steps, and those the telltale sign is like, well, I need to make an API call to get more information to complete this. Well, there's your clue. You're getting more information from an external source. That is another step. That's another, it's another, it's not just Boolean now. You've added, like, do I have this or the other? And if it becomes more complex, like you have to have multiple fields filled in from external sources, you no longer have just one, two, or three states for one column. You might have five columns, each with a Boolean inside. So
Yeah.
it's really up to you how you organize this, but it's, like you said, it's just at the core. It's like, was this done yet? If yes, maybe populate the information in that field instead of null. It could be a Boolean, done or not. It's up to you.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that many people who listen to this now have an aha moment, because I really think we haven't discussed this in detail a lot. So that might be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of maybe we should have a lot more focus on this, because this is something that unlocked event sourcing for me a long time ago. Was really understanding how powerful the projection of past events is and how to track progress through things that are non-trivial.
Yeah.
And so, and the problem with all of the Hello World projects out there is they really don't have a lot of external API calls. At least the ones we've been doing around event sourcing, it's about the shopping cart and things like that.
Yeah.
And when you start to look at the influx of information from external systems and how you coordinate what you have, what you don't have, you start to get to just seeing how the processors are highly interchangeable with what humans do with the UI. And for me, that was an aha moment many years ago, where I personally felt forced to think about sagas and like, oh, sagas are a good thing. I'm going to continue to think about the um, diner example of the same slip of paper going from taking the order to paying for everything. But that started to lose its effectiveness along the way somewhere, where I really needed to have maybe, smaller pieces of information along the way and pass coordination from one to-do list that was large to another one. That's when I started to see that, okay, there's a fundamental simplicity at work here. I need to actually drop the idea of um, the diner and the single piece of paper for the order that ends up being the receipt at the end. That's a good place to start, but I think you have to move from there to really evolve. That you'd have true freedom of making new pieces of paper or whatever in your workflow, and
Yeah.
and that, yeah, it's hard to explain. So we have to have more examples.
Examples. Yeah, we need examples. I'm really thinking about adding. So the example that I have in the book, I have a chapter about the to-do list, and the example isn't good. I realize this by now. I might be reworking this with a bigger and a more complicated example, just to showcase what is possible with this pattern.
Yeah, I mean, one that I'd like to see probably would be the acquiring stock.
Yeah.
The because you do have to do an external lookup, and Yeah. So I think having data come in and pushing data out for a payment, and combining these would be a really good non-trivial example of that.
Yeah,
And maybe do both. Maybe you have the simple one and then have a non-trivial
yeah.
one, so
Maybe
that
also that. Yeah.
people see the spectrum of where you can end up in terms of what you're solving. So yeah, I think that's so. Yeah, Sagas. Just to wrap it up, I think if you're in the world of creating this concept of a long running workflow with multiple steps, and you think you're going to have a crazy class to contain it all, some aggregate to contain it all, replace all that with one record in your database that has a column for each step, and if it's been done or not, and if it's been done, what the data it got back is, if it's necessary, and then have multiple of these little boxes that I have about me. Sorry, these gears. Just have lots of those little guys, and they will pick up each of those. They'll basically be triggered by the change in status of any of those columns, and in a one-to-one mapping with those columns. I think that's one of the easiest ways to kind of think about it, and then that way you don't have this idea that one to-do list is one processor. It's if the one to-do list has multiple columns, then that has multiple processors. I think it's easier to describe it like that. So that's how I kind of want to end that. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
In when you implement this, I know exactly the question that will come up next. So when you implement this, does only the coordination processor update the to-do list, or does every processor update the to-do list? And the next question that will come up is, do they write directly to the database, or do they populate it only by events?
Yeah, it's by events, and they're responsible for the updating the
Yeah,
columns. So that's why the to-do list row is the coordinator, because you have these all these different processors working off of that. So while you can have the coordinator, set up all the default values for these multiple columns, each of those other processors get look at that every 5 seconds, or if you have it on a reactive kind of scheme, they get past this change as a record directly, and they see that, oh, hey, this
yeah,
column is something I care about. It's not done yet. That's my job. I'm going to go send this command, get the data back, and then I'm going to populate it. And then next time I'm invoked, I notice that these records already have something, and I don't
yeah,
have to worry about them, right?
exactly.
But yeah, that's how I would do it. And yeah, important questions to ask yourself. And we're seeing a lot of experienced people, like really, really smart people, on the Discord asking these questions. Um, Really, the old experience is getting in the way. They're really smart. They're really good at doing traditional stuff, but then um, it's like a mental block to move to this way of just catching the data and saying, I'm done. Really having that modularity for the workflow to be thought of this way. But anyway,
Yeah.
it's a very cool feeling when you get it and let go. And I think it's the letting go that's so hard for people to do.
Oh,
I'm really seeing it,
it took
because
me
it's
long.
really smart people that I'm seeing posting these problems. I'm like,
Yeah,
wow.
I can relate to that because it took me ages to get it.
Yeah,
Really,
yeah,
really, really long.
yeah, yeah. So
So no, we can't blame anyone. It just takes
yeah.
time to get it right.
So if you're listening to this and you have a lot of experience, it's changing the way you work can be very humbling to yourself.
Yeah, sure.
We've both experienced that, right?
Yeah,
And that's how you grow in your experience, in your career. Your knowledge is really freeing yourself from a lot of things that seemed like a good idea at the time, are really holding you back. So yeah, it's tough.